Okay, so before we get started, I want to give you a brief overview about the database for the rows and permission, and also we'll work on defining the models and migrations and seeders for these models. And in the further videos, we'll work on implementing these in the project itself. So let's start with the database overview. So we'll have a roles table, and it's gonna be a simple one, so an ID and a title, and same for permissions. So it's gonna have an ID and title. So title means the name for the permissions, and we are gonna have a permission underscore role pivot table, so to connect the permission and role, because a role can have many permissions. So belongs to relationship, actually it belongs to many relationship, because a role can belong to multiple permissions, and a permission can also belong to multiple roles. So this pivot table is going to store that. And we are also going to have a role user pivot table, because a user can have multiple roles. So we are going to store that using this pivot table. So you can use any package to implement this thing, so you don't have to deal with database and migrations and all the other stuff. But I'm going to implement it without using any packages. So that's also one of the reasons why I'm giving you an overview. So let's go ahead and define the models, migrations, and seeder for this, and I'll explain to you what each of the files does. So I'm not going to code it from scratch, but I'll just give you an overview. So inside the models, as we have discussed earlier, we are going to have 3 models. So we are introducing 3 models. So permissions, roles, and okay, we already have users, so permissions and roles. So let's go ahead and paste that in here. Okay, I'm just gonna paste that. So the role and permission, and the fillable and all the relationship is also defined in here. So roles belongs to many role class, and the same for the role model as well. And we need to define one more relationship inside the user. So this will throw an error if while trying to see the database. So let's go ahead and define the roles relationship. So this belongs to many role class. So this is gonna be implemented using the pivot table. So defining the models is done. So let's go ahead and define the migrations for these. So as we have discussed earlier, so we are going to introduce 2 new models for roles and permissions, and 2 new pivot tables for permission role and then role user. So let's go ahead and check these out one by one. We have a single column for title for the role and permissions, and for the permission and role we are going to have 2 columns. So one is going to be for an ID, and another one is role ID, and we are also cascading them. So whenever we delete any of the permission or role, then we'll delete these records as well. And the same applies for the role user pivot table as well. So this is also simple. So this is done, and the next step is to define the seeders. So I'll just copy and paste them as well. So we are gonna have 5 seeders, and I'll walk you through each of them one by one. So the first one is permissions table seeder. Here we have permissions, as the name says, as the table name suggests. So we are going to define the permissions for role and then the student. I'm not going to define the permissions for the permissions CRUD itself, because we won't be implementing the permissions CRUD, because defining the permissions for the resources, that's done by in the code level itself. So letting the user create the permissions on the admin side won't make any sense, because we also have to implement them manually in the code side. So we have role CRUD, so role create, edit, show, delete, and access, and the same for the students as well. And what else do we have? Okay, we also have role table seeder. So we'll be seeding 2 roles by default. One is going to be admin, and the other one is going to be user. And we have a users table seeder. So we'll be seeding 2 users. One is going to be admin, and the other one is going to be user. And we also have three seeders for the, okay, two seeders I guess for the pivot tables. So one is the permission role. So first we are defining a admin permission where we are grabbing all the permissions, and then we are grabbing the first role, which is the admin, and then using the permissions relationship, and then using the sync method we are passing in all the admin permissions. And for the user permission, what we are doing is we are only giving the user the access to students. So using the same approach, we are finding the role with the ID of 2 and using the permissions relationship and then passing in the user permissions. So this is also simple. And the last one is role user table seeder. So we implemented the relationship for permissions and role, so we also need to implement the same for role and user. So we are grabbing the first user, which is the admin, and then giving it admin role, and then we are also grabbing the user from the database and then giving it the role of id2, which is the user role. So that actually sums up the roles and permission seeder. And the last thing that we need to do is call these in the database seeder. So I am gonna again paste the command or the code for the seeders. So we are calling the seeders one by one. First we are so the sequence also matters because we are first gonna create the users, and then we are creating the permissions, and then creating the roles. So up till here we don't have any dependencies, they are all independent seeders. And after that we have the permission role table seeder. So this seeder depends on permission and then role, and we are also calling the role user table seeder. So this seeder depends on the role table seeder and the user table seeder. So now it's finally time to test this thing. So let's go ahead and call the artisan migrate fresh and then seed the database. So let's hit enter and this should work. Okay, that seems to work. Let's go ahead and test it out in the database. So let's reload it once and let's test these tables one by one. So let's check out users, and we should have two users. One is admin and the other one is user. We have permissions, so all the permissions that we define in the seeder are created, and we have roles, so we should have two roles, admin and user, and the pivot tables should also work fine. So permission 1 to 10 is given to role id 1 and 10 is given to role id 2, and one more we have, that is role user, so 1 1 and 2 2. So these seem to work fine, and we are done for this part. And in the next part we will be working on CRUD of roles. So in the first part we'll be working on displaying the roles data, and then in the further videos we'll implement the CRUD, and later we'll implement the permissions implementation. So that's gonna be an interesting one. So that's it for this part, and I'll see you guys in the next one.